Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that the first cracks in the tight-knit circle begin not with a shouted accusation but with a soft, private betrayal, the kind that leaves no visible scar but rearranges every relationship that touches it. Kat experiences that rearrangement like a slow bruise. Secrets reveal themselves in odd places, in the quiet of late-night text exchanges, in the way people avoid meeting her eyes, in the sudden, uncomfortable silences after someone mentions the product launch where Chelsea vanished. Each revelation presses on her ribs until she breathes shallow, and every new piece of information lands like a stone. The world she'd held steady, her job, her friendships, the logic of cause and effect starts to wobble, and she is the one left scrambling to keep up. The launch night is where everything changes. It was supposed to be a triumph. Leather and lights arranged to flatter a brand that had been their hard-earned baby. Chelsea was meant to walk the runway for her own designs, a living statement that the Dupree name was invincible. Instead, the memory of that night is a jagged loop of sounds and images that won't resolve. Kat remembers the cloying perfume, the sharp clack of heels, the flashbulbs, then a scream like glass breaking, a panicked scatter of bodies, and the realization that Chelsea was gone from the crowd. The world narrowed to the absence where Chelsea had been standing. Later, when the dust settles and the news vans leave, the explanations come wrapped in procedural language: an abduction, an attack, an arrested suspect. But legal terms have no purchase on the raw edges of what happened. The impact is personal. Chelsea returns, fragile as spun glass, and the fracture lines that had always been merely invisible now map themselves across everything, between partners, between friends, between family. For Kat, it is not only the kidnapping that wounds her, it is the litany of secrets that overlay the event. She learns, in incremental, bone-tiring doses, about choices made without her consent, about the people who knew more than they told, about private communications that left her out of the circle of trust. Each omission feels like a stake driven through the safety she thought she had. The worst of those discoveries is Chelsea's decision to withdraw from every online platform. The announcement is quiet on email, a terse statement on the company's official page, yet it lands like thunder. Kat had imagined a different kind of comeback, one fortified by an army of followers ready to shield Chelsea's narrative and a media strategy to take the voice back from the aggressor. Instead, Chelsea chooses silence. She packages her life away behind passwords and private numbers and tells the world she is stepping back. To Kat, who has always believed visibility is power and defense, the choice feels like surrender. She sees every deleted account as a concession that hands the stage to whoever had shouted the loudest. Kat's dismay is not merely professional. It is a personal betrayal. The social maps they'd traced, their coordinated posts, the shared interviews, the collective brand strategy were a language they had used to speak to each other and to the world. Chelsea's decision appears, to Kat, as a unilateral dissolution of their shared identity. The feeling is visceral. The same tightness in her chest when she had been excluded at company meetings, the acrid taste of being left behind. She moves through corridors with the sense of someone who has been reassigned to a post without being told. Every time Chelsea passes without looking her way, the small absence becomes a canyon. Complicating matters is what Kat starts to see in the peripheral social scenes that cluster around their lives. She observes Thomas, always the easy charm, the kind of person who arrives with a laugh and leaves with a new connection, sitting with Eva as if they were old friends catching up after an absence. The sight feels like a slight, though rationally there is no reason for it to be. Thomas and Eva's laughter rings out, and Kat reads it like a taboo, conspiring against her. It is as if the room had split into insiders and outsiders, and she had been shuffled into the wrong pile. That misread deepens when Kat later sees Thomas in what appears to be a tender embrace with Haley. The sight blows a hot, irrational wind through her chest. A longer look, a hand resting on a shoulder, and Kat's mind constructs a private narrative in which Thomas is an unreliable anchor whose loyalties slip like sand. She knows intellectually that people touch in public for reasons that have nothing to do with betrayal. But the raw nerve of being already wounded makes rational interpretations impossible. She begins to treat Thomas as if he might be an indirect instrument of Chelsea's withdrawal, a symbol for the choices that exclude her. When she asks questions, she finds evasions. When she probes deeper, she is met with blankness. What Kat doesn't know is far more complicated than what she sees. Haley, quietly mischievous and not without streaks of self-protection, has indeed been using Thomas in a way that is small and tactical. She knows Bill's weak points. She knows how the man who loves fiercely can be coaxed into jealousy if only to snap him back into attention for Chelsea's sake. But Kat has no access to Haley's pragmatic, sometimes ruthless calculus. She only sees the surface, the intimacy, and she groans inwardly as one more thread in the web tightens around her throat. Kat is not given a moment to untangle these emotions before a more explosive domestic crisis arrives. Her parents Ted and Nicole have been circling each other like two geodesic spheres that no longer fit. Rumors of their marital trouble had trickled through the family grapevine for months. An embarrassing hush that Kat's professional life had often made her too busy to address. She had long refused the idea that her parents would actually divorce. Ted and Nicole, with their on and off embraces and tired looks, had always been an anchor for her sense of familial continuity. The concept of them being unmoored threatens to shift the ground under her feet entirely. Then Carlton, her father's business partner, appears with an ease that feels like intrusion. Nicole and Carlton's flirtation is measured, almost crafty, as if both are aware of the possibility of scandal and choose to savor the danger anyway. Kat catches them in a moment that is too intimate for daylight, Carlton caressing Nicole's cheek in a way that carries historical tenderness, an appropriated intimacy that Kat views as theft. Without thinking, she acts. She launches across the room, grabs a glass without measuring, and throws water into Carlton's face. The sound is a small, shocking clap in the middle of their polite conversation. Nicole's gasp, a sound of both apology and betrayal, punctures the moment like a balloon popping. The aftermath is a tumult of apologies and wide eyes. Nicole is mortified, not only by the spectacle but by the raw, savage need that drove her daughter's hands. She stammers apologies to Carlton, to Ted, to anyone who will accept them. Her gaze lands on Kat, and a complex shame floods the room, guilt for failing to keep the family intact, sorrow over the humiliation publicized for a circle that already felt stretched to breaking, the knowledge that her daughter has now seen the worst of her adult choices. For Kat, the action is less about the physics of water and more a narrative statement. She cannot accept the dissolution of the world she thought she had. She cannot watch her mother move on, especially with Carlton, who represents not just the erosion of a marriage but the encroachment of business into the last private spaces of her family. Her splashing is a child's attempt to right an adult wrong, an instinct to throw something in the air that might stick and rejoin the fractured pieces. Once the water dries on Carlton's suit, the deeper stains remain: betrayal, confusion, and the sense that someone has rewritten the past without consulting her. It is here that the question emerges: will the presence of Carlton motivate Kat to take a more active role in her parents' lives? Will she attempt to intervene in Ted's attempts to keep Nicole from leaving? Or will she retreat into the comforting logic of work and avoidance? The temptation to fix things is violent in her chest. She can imagine calling Ted into the kitchen and saying the things she never said, reminding him of the promises he made, confronting his failures, urging him to beg for what he has abandoned. But this is not a neat battle she can win by force of argument. Her parents are adults with their own messy histories. The water is a gesture, an event, but it is only the beginning of the unspooling. While Kat reels internally, another thread is being tugged elsewhere on that will prove, in time, to be the soft center of resilience for some families in this narrative. Samantha, younger, brash, and stubbornly hopeful, decides to undertake what many would call an impossible task, to rebuild the fractured relationship between her two fathers, Martin and Smitty. Samantha's motivation is simple and urgent. The distance between Martin and Smitty has been lamented in the family for too long, a slow rot in the structure that used to hold them together. As if to counterbalance the chaos surrounding Chelsea and Kat, Samantha insists on creating pockets of repair. Her plan is strategic and small in scale: schedule visits, manufacture opportunities for proximity, and create situations where the two men are placed in the gentle necessity of cooperation. She enlists Tyrell, a steady presence, to be an ally. Tyrell's calm and measured approach helps Samantha orchestrate something that feels organic rather than manipulative. They plan outings that mask the intention: barbecue invitations framed as neighborhood get-togethers, a fishing trip older men might appreciate, a simple holiday dinner with an extra chair set at the table. Smitty, who has been wounded by past betrayals and mistrust, is cautious but not unreceptive. When Samantha asks if he would allow her and Tyrell to visit June, someone who had been kept off limits by previous tension, she hesitates, then agrees. The moment of permission is small, but to Samantha it is a seismic victory. It signals that the old resentments might be porous, that time and steady care could stitch something back together. Martin, on the other hand, receives Samantha's ultimatum with the kind of wary hope that has hardened into a thin film of skepticism. He is not naive, he understands the work required to reconcile. Yet Samantha's insistence cracks something in him. She makes it clear, not in an accusatory way but with direct, heartfelt logic, that family can be chosen, reshaped, and repaired if someone keeps showing up. Confronted with a possibility that he might lose more than he had already lost, Martin decides to make a move. He reaches out to Smitty personally, not with grand gestures but with a simple invitation to coffee. The meeting is awkward at first, full of small talk and stilted laughter, but in the rawness of a humdrum cafe, they find a way back to one another. It is complicated, of course. Smitty does not erase the past overnight. He frames the potential reconciliation with a caveat: he needs proof that the behavior that broke them will not repeat. This demand is not cruel, it is survival logic. He asks Martin to demonstrate consistent humility, daily acts of care, and an internal transformation that would show the old patterns are not going to return. Martin is reluctant but willing. The result is a slow, halting reintroduction to intimacy that begins not with fireworks but with the small mechanics of sex and companionship reappearing as comfortable and ordinary things rather than fraught tests. For many watching, especially Samantha, this small victory is an emotional bomb. She sees the way Smitty relaxes in ways that suggest not full trust but a readiness to rebuild. It is not a fairy tale reconciliation, it is messy and tentative. There are nights of anxiety, days of doubt, and one or two sharp backslides that remind them all how fragile their progress is. But the arc moves, and that is the proof Samantha needs. Movement towards something better is possible. Back in the more volatile orbit of Chelsea and Kat, the undercurrent of mistrust keeps washing against their walls. Kat's actions, throwing water, confronting Thomas, charging at perceived betrayal, are evidence that she is a person who will not let relationships degrade without exacting a price. But those actions also distance her from people who might be allies in the long game. Chelsea, meanwhile, oscillates between needing support and needing autonomy. The decision to withdraw from social platforms has not solved a single external problem, it has merely reframed the battlefield. Kat's sense of being shut out grows, and with it, the hunger to act. Yet everything converges on a certain sense of impending consequence. The public events, the private fights, the tentative reconciliations, each one feels like a string being knotted around a bouquet of volatile flowers. No one in this circle can predict precisely how long any peace will last. For Kat, the accumulation of secrets, misread gestures, and parental dissolutions construct a narrative of being perpetually on the outside, a place she does not intend to stay in. Her choices will be loud, and that loudness promises both salvage and ruin. As twilight gathers over the house where most of these lives intersect, Kat stands alone in the garden, staring at the dark line of trees. The garden is quiet, the world outside near silent. She thinks of Chelsea's withdrawal, of the way Thomas smiled with Eva and then with Haley, of water on a suited man's face and a mother's apology. She touches the faint wet ring left on her palm from the glass she had thrown, a physical reminder that her anger had chosen a shape. Her next move, she realizes, will not be born of impulse alone. If she intends to stitch anything back together, be it marriage, friendship, or her partnership with Chelsea, she will have to be more deliberate. She owes it to herself and to the people she loves to find the proper battleground for truth. And yet, Even as she resolves this inward mission, a message pings on her phone, a terse, unadorned line from someone she thought she could rely on, a line that hints at new choices made without her knowledge. The bruise inside her freshens. The garden's cool air tastes suddenly metallic. The night tightens like a fist. She breathes in, preparing for whatever comes next, knowing that the coming conflict will demand more than splashed water and shouted words. It will demand clarity, courage, and a willingness to step into the very places she has been avoiding.